Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Browns Insider. It is of course Wednesday night. I'm Dan Labbe and joined by Tom Reed. We are going to get you ready for the Browns and the Falcons coming up on Sunday. Of course the Browns coming off of that disappointing loss against the Houston Texans on Sunday. And Tom, out in Berea, what's kind of the sense around this team now as they get back out on the practice field?
Just trying to, obviously trying to come back from a real clunker. One good thing about that game is no one has to feel like they single-handedly let the team down because it was a pretty poor performance. You could probably count the winning performances on one hand and maybe have a few fingers left over.
You look at, like you said, everything kind of let them down. The offensive line, the defense, quarterback play, running game.
Special teams.
Yeah, special teams, of course. Of all of those things, is there one that stood out to you as the most concerning? Is the thing that maybe could linger the longest?
Well, I still think you have this issue, with how good this offensive line without Alex Mack can be.
Yeah.
They played pretty well against Cincinnati, so you're thinking, okay, maybe they're turning the corner a little bit. Well, J.J. Watt and Brian Cushing kind of put an end to that right there. Now, obviously, Watt is the best defensive player in the league, so he's wrecked a lot of offensive lines. But I think that's the concern right now is still that offensive line, which does so much obviously for the running game, which again was kind of non-existent for the third time in 4 games.
Well, speaking of that running game, the Browns made a big move this week. Kind of came out of nowhere. Ben Tate, a week after his comments about not being happy with his playing time and then only getting 2 carries against Houston, is no longer a Cleveland Brown. He was actually claimed by the Vikings today. What do you think contributed most to him getting released? Was it the comments and the attitude? Was it the play on the field?
I think it was a combination of both. Mike Pettin addressed that today. I certainly don't think the attitude helped. But when we're talking about a running attack right now that is really struggling because of the offensive line not getting the holes that they were, Pettin kind of, I don't want to say foreshadowed it because I don't think any of us expected it, but on Monday was talking about the need to have an explosiveness in the running backs, and Crowell certainly gives you that.
Yeah.
And Ben Tate just hadn't run the ball very well in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but still, I still think he's part of this team. If he wasn't so public about his lack of playing time, and it's not to say that Ben Tate may have just kind of like maybe talked his way out of town in some ways, that he could see that he wasn't going to be a factor here in the last 5 or 6 weeks, and let me see if I can get somewhere else. I don't know. That's just a guess on my part, but certainly those comments couldn't have did not ingratiate himself at all with Mike Pettin. Mike Pettin is trying to, he's a new coach. A year ago, Chud had an opportunity to maybe send a message to some players by getting rid of them late in that season as a losing streak piled up, and he didn't. Now, Mike Pettin, first sign of a little bit of problems here, he's sending a message. It's about the team, and it's about production.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was kind of thinking, obviously, this coach didn't have the kind of success that Mike Pettin has had off the bat. But when Eric Mangini first came here, one of the first things he did was he kind of started to root out some issues. He traded away guys, Braylon Edwards for one, Kellen Winslow, some guys that were talented and more talented and giving you more production than Ben Tate. But he was concerned about that locker room and keeping that locker room engaged and focused, and is that kind of what Mike Pettin and this organization is looking to do now?
Again, I think that's a part of it. I do believe that it was two-pronged. Again, I think that especially with the state of the offensive line right now, they wanted maybe the fresher legs and guys that were showing you a burst, and we really didn't see that from Ben Tate over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Not to say that he doesn't go to Minnesota and does that, but I hadn't seen it. And when you throw those two combinations of not being very productive and not necessarily projecting yourself as a team first player, especially kind of in the passive aggressive approach that he was kind of message he was sending through the media, you can see why they made the move they did.
Part of it too, when you look at the backs, and again, this is just an on the field thing, it seems like Terrence West is the guy that can kind of give you what Ben Tate can give you too. And Isaiah Crowell, of course, offers that explosiveness. It seems like maybe they finally decided these are the two guys we want to stick with. These are the two guys that maybe work best together.
Well, and don't forget too, they did give them a little bit of a preview of that early in the season when both of them they handled the running chores pretty well early in the year, with Tate missed like 2.5 games with that knee injury. Of course, now this is a little bit different. Now the games are much more important. The Browns suddenly find themselves as a playoff contender, so it's a little bit different, but I think it's just a risk that the Browns were willing to take.
So now it's kind of the question we've been asking since week 1, but now, of course, you take Ben Tate out of the equation. It seems like Glenn Winston might get some opportunities, but not really. So these two backs, who do you think is going to end up getting the bulk of the carries?
I would be surprised. I think that it looks like they're leaning toward letting Crowell be the first guy, but he's had a couple fumbles. Yeah. I really don't. I'd be surprised if either one pulls away. I think we're going to just see maybe one has a few more carries each week than the other. I think they'll kind of roll with a hot hand. Mm-hmm. I think Crowell will probably start in the next game, but I just think that I would be surprised if one guy by week 13 is like getting the bulk of the carries and the other guy's getting 5.
Do you think this is a long-term solution? Obviously, the rest of the season, like you said, we're likely to see this. But I mean, is this something carrying into next year, where they look at these two backs and they say, we can continue to work with these two guys? Yeah,
I think it will depend on how it works at the end of the season. Well, this is the way the NFL is set up anymore. I mean, there are very few Adrian Petersons out there, guys that just get all the carries. Teams like to use two backs. Maybe the carries aren't exactly the same number, but I think that they'll want to get to the end of the season and kind of reassess where they are. I mean, I certainly don't see them drafting another running back with these two guys there. Again, it may be one of these things they go through training camp and see if Glenn Winston down the road can give them anything. Again, maybe they make a decision there.
I mean, as long as they're both happy, then you kind of go with it, I suppose. Yep. Another guy that we're going to finally get to see on the field, Josh Gordon. The long saga is over. Ray Farmer's comments are weeks behind us now, and Kyle Shanahan seemed a lot more positive about Josh Gordon coming back than Ray Farmer did. Realistically, though, with Josh Gordon back, we remember what he did against Minnesota last year, but that was not as long of a layoff. Right. What's a realistic expectation for Gordon?
Just to come in and just become the number one receiver, which he is. I mean, will it take a series or two or a quarter or two? Maybe. But, if I'm him, I'm Keyshawn Johnson in it. Just throw me the damn ball. I'll make the plays. They've been very fortunate to get what they have out of the guys that they've had. I know that group did a great job, but this is your number one guy, and you're in a playoff race. You're going to live and die with this guy in large measure. Again, I think that guys like Gabriel and Hawkins can give you obviously some help you out, and give and spread the field a little bit as far as not focusing completely on Gordon, but this is your number one guy.
Yeah, and whenever you watch Josh Gordon play, and then you see some of the other receivers on the team also, he just always makes it look so easy. Yeah. He just seems to glide down the field, and you can just tell he's a different type of athlete and a different type of player.
There's an effortlessness about him, and his stride is something to behold. I mean, go back and watch that 90, whatever it was, run in Jacksonville last year, and I'm telling you, it's just something to behold, to watch him just pulling away from guys.
Yeah. The impact of Gordon, of course. We know what he can do when he catches the football. But you mentioned Taylor Gabriel, Hawkins. These are guys that maybe now can work back into where they're a little more comfortable. All of a sudden, Andrew Hawkins doesn't have to be that down-the-field threat. Right. Taylor Gabriel doesn't have to be that guy. They can kind of do a little work underneath and cause some problems underneath now, maybe.
Yeah, no, without question. I mean, I think Gabriel's going to continue to get his touches. I think he's one of the major finds of this season for the Ray Farmer's staff. Hawkins has been their leading receiver. I think he's going to continue to get touches. It'll be interesting to see, if what happens with Travis Benjamin's numbers and how many chances he gets. And, Miles Austin, the same way, to see where he goes. He's been effective up until last week on making third down catches and stuff like that. Had a little bit of a tough game the other day. But, it'll be interesting to see which guy kind of loses the playing time. I would think it would be between those two.
Yeah, it's kind of strange to talk about at the beginning of the season. I don't think we ever could have imagined this would be a discussion.
Right.
But here we are. You're looking at guys. You can go through this list of receivers, and you can make a case for every single one of them to not lose reps.
Yeah, and it's, the one that I think that stands out to me more than any of them, well, Gabriel, of course.
Yeah.
Gabriel's the big one that like jumps off the charts. But Travis Benjamin, because of his inability at times to catch a punt,
Yeah.
and I don't think he's dropped a pass. I mean, he's been terrific as a receiver, but I still wonder if he's the guy that kind of, at least at first, is the odd man out. We'll wait and see.
Especially because he hasn't really, like I said, with Gabriel and Hawkins, these are guys that can be slot guys that can go underneath.
Right.
Benjamin hasn't really shown that a lot. He's kind of actually been the big downfield threat for this team.
Yeah, he's played a little bit over the middle. If you think
Yeah.
about some of his, and I don't ever remember him until this year making those type of catches
Yeah.
over the middle in traffic. But again, like you said, those other two guys, that's kind of more their role, more they're comfortable in, and they've played well at it. Again, this is a good problem to have. But I just think that it's good. Maybe one of those two guys. I still think Benjamin originally may be the guy that maybe have his role reduced a little.
And everybody on the Browns side, maybe aside from Shanahan last week, seems to kind of be downplaying what Gordon's role will be early on, maybe trying to lower those expectations a little bit. Should we buy that, though? Because, I'm thinking Mike Pettin, he's going to be on that sideline on Sunday, and Josh Gordon is going to be that shiny new toy, and he's a good one.
Yeah.
And it's going to be tough to keep him off that field.
Yeah, they may ease him into the game a little bit. But, yeah, I would be surprised if he's not the guy that has the most targets in the first game. That's just, he was the best receiver in the NFL last year. Maybe he's not that. Again, there is something to be said for being off for this long. And they were talking today about being in football shape. I don't care. I still think he's such a big target too. That's the other thing that has been amazing about this group. I mean, other than Austin, these guys are like 5'8", 5'7", 165 pounds. This guy's a legit 6'3", 6'4" guy who can run like the wind. You're going to get him the ball.
Yeah, and you've got a quarterback coming off of a tough game,
Yeah.
and who's been just waiting to have these kinds of weapons available to
Yeah.
him again. Let's look at the defensive side. Let's start with the injuries. The Browns get potentially good news in Jabal Sheard. He could play on Sunday. What's the latest with Sheard? What did we hear today?
They're just kind of right now. Basically, he got a second opinion. They do believe it's not something. Originally, they said he could be out for the year.
Yeah.
Now he's gone from out to the year to day. So of course that's great news. Does he play this week? I don't know, but it's certainly better news than out for the year. So maybe he plays this week. Maybe he plays next week. But it's at least they feel like he's going to be back and playing at some point. The question becomes how effective is he going to be with this foot injury?
Yeah, and the other guy, Carlos Dansby, not out for the year.
Right.
Coach Pettin was actually asked today if Dansby would try and go this week. Is that even a remote possibility?
I spoke with Dansby. We had a little chat, and he's not ruling it out. He has a huge motivation playing. All of his family is going to be there. He's from Alabama, so he wants to play if he can. But who knows? I mean, I kind of doubt that he can come back in 1 week. I would think it would be more maybe a second week. But again, this is good news because 2 days ago Pettin was talking about upwards to a month. If he only misses one game because of this, that would be a huge plus for the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, this defense is starting to get really thin. You've lost Phil Taylor. That defensive line is pretty decimated. And you start losing Dansby, who, of course, we know is kind of the leader of that defense, calls out the plays, does all of those things. Jabal Sheard, who's been having a very nice year. You lose those two guys, you're really scrambling to fill those holes.
Yeah, which is already on a defense that has, it's ranked pretty low to begin with. So, yeah, you don't want to, if you can at least minimize it. And again, maybe... I would rule more in maybe giving those guys one more week, given the record is still 6-4.
Mm-hmm.
If you drop one game, it's not great, but it's not like you're out of the playoff picture. But that's not the way Pettin's been. Pettin, if he can play, if these guys can play, they're going to play.
Another guy who continues to be out, and again, we don't know what's going to happen with him on Sunday yet, Jordan Cameron. This concussion thing just kind of keeps lingering around, and we know that sometimes these things can last for a long time. And again, Coach Patton today mentioned it, that you have a setback, you got to start the whole process over again. What's the thinking now, right now, on Jordan Cameron? Is there any chance that we can see him on Sunday?
I don't know. He was in the locker room for the first time I can remember. He was in the locker room, kind of not on the record, but just chatting with a couple of the reporters. I chatted with him just briefly. He seems to be in good spirits, but we don't know what that means. I mean, it's not like a knee injury where usually you have 2 to 4 weeks, or, well, I guess maybe not in Carlos Dansby's spot. But, you know, with a concussion, as you mentioned, Dan, these things can linger. He may get back out there, start running, and again, start feeling the symptoms again. So I just don't think you can say where he is right now. Again, it was encouraging to at least see him in the locker room, interacting with people. That's a sign, but I don't know what that means for Sunday. I wouldn't even hazard a guess.
And for a guy like Cameron, I mean, this has to be tough because obviously he's in a contract year. He was having a pretty good year when he was on the field, making some big catches. You've got Josh Gordon coming back. You'd think that would benefit him as well.
Yeah.
This is just a really difficult situation for him.
It is, and you really can't, you know, what we know now about concussions and head traumas, these guys, he has to be 100% right, I think, to go back out there.
Especially because he's had multiple.
Yes, again, he's had 3 within a 2-year span. And I just don't know. I don't know if I think he's got to be 100% to even think about going out there with a head injury.
Yeah. So all that being said, how important has it been that this team has had Gary Barnidge, who you wrote a great story about last week, and Jim Dre stepping up and not giving you Jordan Cameron type production, but these guys are coming in and making big catches for this team?
Yeah, I mean, it helps. It certainly helps. They're kind of like chain movers.
Yeah.
Now, both of them have, have made plays that are short catches that end up being longer carries. But yeah, they've been very fortunate. There are a couple positions where I think the Browns have really, one of the things that has changed with this team is that they're starting to build more depth than we've seen them have in years past. You look at the receiving position, you look at the tight ends, you look at a guy like K'Wan Williams in the secondary. They never found guys like this.
Exactly.
The places where they're really stretched, to me, and we were talking about earlier, is the linebackers. I mean, right now, if Sheard can't go, Mingo is going to have to take a much bigger role in this team with a bad shoulder. And I think this is really going to be an important stretch for Mingo, personally, I think.
Yeah, let's talk about Barkevious Mingo, because he's a guy who, a lot of expectations on him coming into this year. And obviously, he was a high draft pick, so that comes with the territory. Every now and again, you see him make a play, but then you see him miss a tackle or miss some coverage, something like that. For Mingo, and he's not a guy that Mike Patton wasn't here when he was drafted. Obviously, Ray Farmer was, but this isn't his regime. These guys would be willing to move on from him. You talk about how important it is. What does he need to show?
Well, again, I mean, it's so tough because, again, I give him credit for playing with the shoulder injury. I mean, he's playing with one arm out there. But this is a performance, we hear this all the time from this coaching staff. It's a performance-based league. And at the end of this season, it would not surprise me to see them looking to go back into the market looking for an outside linebacker. But I'll tell you what, if Mingo can somehow help them over the next couple of weeks, he can maybe change the narrative on his story to this point, which is, I think this is fair. It's been fairly disappointing. But if he can come out and play a couple good games here while Sheard is clearly not 100%, or if he's not playing at all, then maybe we look at Mingo in a different light. But again, it's tough because of the injury.
And on top of the injury, he has been asked to do a lot of different things. He was drafted as a pass rusher, and this year he's been asked to do a lot more coverage.
Yeah, one of the news items that came out of the day was that they're going to ask Mingo to go back to doing a little bit more pass rushing here, especially if Sheard can't go. You're going to see Mingo going more after the quarterback. I think he has, I was counting it up today, he has 3 hits on the quarterback this year. I think he has the 1 sack. He had 7 hits altogether last year, so he's kind of in that same spot that he was last year. I mean, the guy is super athletic. He's often around plays. It's just a matter of making plays. And we'll see how this season ends up with him and what, as you said, Dan, these guys didn't draft him. I think they liked him.
Yeah.
But again, liking and performing are two different things.
And, we saw it last week. This team was just unable to generate much pressure on Ryan Mallett, which could have changed that game because we know Ryan Mallett isn't a real mobile guy. And this week you're playing one of the top passing offenses in the league. Your secondary guys are going to be stretched awfully thin trying to cover these receivers. So if Mingo and the rest of this defense can get pressure on Matt Ryan, that can change things.
Yeah. And again, that was one of the, there were so many disappointing aspects of that game, but boy, I remember, the only guy I remember hitting him was K'Wan Williams, came in on a safety blitz and got him one time, and they didn't sack him. And that's been an issue with this team. I mean, they have 20 sacks this year. I mean, they had 40 last year, and that was thought to be disappointing given the talent level they had and the emphasis on getting to the quarterback. Yeah. You remember Joe Banner and the coaching staff and Ray Horton talking about wanting to get to the quarterback last year. And right now they're sitting at half that total with only 6 games left. So that has really been an issue this year of not getting enough pressure on the quarterbacks.
Now I mentioned the secondary, how they're going to be tested. You got Julio Jones, you've got Roddy White, you've got Matt Ryan throwing the football. With Justin Gilbert kind of struggling in and out, not getting a lot of plays.
He didn't play at all last week.
Yeah, exactly. We know Joe Hayden is probably going to be spending a lot of time on Julio Jones, but the spotlight kind of goes to a guy like K'Wan Williams now. Do you think he's up for the task?
Well, I think he'll continue to play again in this when there are. I still think that Buster Screen will probably get the other guy, whoever that is, probably Roddy White, but it's there's no question that the coaching staff likes K'Wan Williams. And when I said earlier you had a handful of guys that played well last week, he was one of them. He was one of the guys that made a couple plays. I think he broke up a touchdown pass in the end zone, was one of the guys that did get to the quarterback. I think you're going to continue to see his role increase in this defense as long as he's healthy. He missed those couple games or missed parts of those games with some injuries. He seems to be healthy again.
Let's talk about the quarterback situation. Brian Hoyer, we're kind of back here because Brian Hoyer struggled again. And I guess this is the life of Brian Hoyer right now, fair or not. Yeah. If he struggles again against Atlanta, is that going to reignite the quarterback debate? I think,
well, as far as the debate, the debate is kind of on the periphery.
Yeah.
I mean, people have been debating even when he was quote-unquote playing well. I think, to me, what the issue is, we're getting late in the season. You look at the AFC playoff picture. All you have to do is look at the division now. They're almost at the bottom again. They've got to, those teams are all ahead of them, obviously. Yeah. So I think if they drop these next 2 games, that's where if they're 6-6 and it doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs, I do think that's where you can understand if management and the coaching staff get together and say, look, we owe it to ourselves to see what we have with Johnny Manziel. And I think that's very fair. And again, a part of it will be how the quarterback plays here. If Brian can pick up his game, and he's played well in spurts in other games, so let's give him credit. He's made plenty of big plays for this offense. But if he plays well with Josh Gordon, then I think they owe him at least 2 more games, before that conversation happens. And if they win one of these 2 games, I think it continues on. I think as long as the Browns are in the playoff race, I don't think we see Johnny Manziel unless there would be an injury.
And they owe him a chance to play with Josh Gordon.
Absolutely. I mean, he's earned it. I mean, his play he's played well enough, given everything that he's kept them in games. Again, he did not play well, no bones about it. He did not play well the other day. He's had a couple of these gathey where he didn't play well in Jacksonville either. So again, let's see where they are in 2 weeks. If they lose this game in Atlanta and then go lose in Buffalo, then I think it's a conversation that can be opened.
And I think, I know that the NFL, it's an any given Sunday league. We know that. We've seen that all season long, not just with the Browns, but with every team in this league. But You got 2 weeks here on the road, and then you're coming home, and you have to play a very, very good Indianapolis team that can do some things that maybe cause matchup problems for the Browns, not even to mention Andrew Luck. So that being said, are these 2 games, I don't know if you want to call these 2 games of the season, but are we going to know a lot about this team after these next 2?
I'll answer that by saying I don't think they can go to 6-6 and make the playoffs.
Okay.
I think that they have to win at least one of these games. I just don't see them. If they go to 6-6, it means they will have lost 3 in a row.
Yeah, and they'll probably have to win 4 in a row just to get back in.
Right, because I 10-6. I think there's going to be plenty of 10-6 teams. Given this, and it's interesting, Dan, one of the dynamics that's kind of at play here is how much the AFC North, which does not have a team under 500, has beat up on the NFC South. I think the record is 8-1-1 in those 2 teams playing, in this 2 teams divisions playing each other, and it may come down to something as crazy as who has the hiccup in this division against one of these teams. The Browns obviously have a chance this week to, I think they're 2-0 already against the South, to go 3-0. Atlanta's starting to play a little bit better, though, too.
Yeah, Atlanta leading their division at 4-6.
They're tied. I believe they're tied.
They're tied with New Orleans.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's interesting about this game. The Browns, you want to go win your division, but the Browns are 6-4. They are in play for the wild card if they are unable to close that gap. Atlanta, they got to win their division. There's no way
they're an absolutely desperate team. And I will say this. I think the Texans are a desperate team. They probably still feel at 5-5, especially at 4-5. They had to win this game. If they went 4-6, they were done. And that was a good team. That's a much better team than their record shows. You can say what you want about Jacksonville. That was a terrible loss, obviously, as was this one. But with Jacksonville, you're saying, how do you lose to that team?
Yeah.
I can understand. I think we even talked about it on the show last week that the Texans, the reason we didn't think that the Browns would lose to the Texans. Obviously, a rookie starting as quarterback. We didn't think Arian Foster was going to play, which he didn't.
Yeah.
But you look at the offensive line, the defensive line, and some of the talent on that team. It's not a bad team.
All right, what was your pick for this week? Have you
I have not made
yet?
the pick. I have not made the pick, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure. I guess I may be leaning a little to the Browns, but I am not sure. This team hasn't played necessarily great on the road. They did go down and win in Cincinnati. But to me, it's a huge game for them. I really think if they lose 2 in a row, it becomes a huge game in Buffalo. They have to win. So we'll see.
All right, Atlanta this week. Then it's on the road to Buffalo. Then it's home for 2 before they wrap up the season in Carolina and in Baltimore. So we'll see what happens over these next 2 weeks, as Tom Reed says. Got to at least win one of these next 2, if not both of these games, if you want to stay in the playoff picture. That'll do it for another edition of Wednesday Browns Insider. We're going to take a week off next week. Got to cook those turkeys. And we'll be back the week after that with another edition of Browns Insider. For Tom Reed, I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.